Record to the. All right, recording is in progress. I'm not sure whose podcast this is, but just in case it's mine, my name is Sam Liebel. But Joe, just in case it's yours, I need to give you right away the second word.
I'm Joe from the Brothers Kren. So I'm joining Sam today. I we wanted to talk about poetry and whatnot, but we were
First, that we
geeking
wanted to
out.
geek out a little bit about, I think I want to do unboxing videos for used bookstores. I am very fortunate and I was proud I bought this because of Joe. I would not have gotten this, but this is a great, and this is a mint this is how I like my books. They're nice, but they're not so brand new that I feel bad about doing some of the things that I do to them. So for instance, I wanted to share this is a used book. This is, of course, the classic Geoffrey of Monmouth, History of the Kings of Britain. We all know it. We all love it.
I got the
Um,
same copy or the
yes.
same.
So I like this because I don't feel quite as bad doing things like sticking things. So I always do a tab. I always do and folding back. Sometimes I like to fold back, and I don't like um I always do one that opens to the contents, and then I always do one that opens up right to the index. I love this stuff, right? And I always want quick access. And one more thing, I also just underline this. I do underline in pencil. I do. I use a type of pencil that's easy to erase. But check out this name. See if you can read that.
I can't. Oh, I can now. 1 second. I'll just do one thing. Uh, Corinius fights Gog Magog.
I
Gog
mean,
Magog.
isn't that just a nice thing to open up to? Gog Magog?
Uh, it sounds Tolkienian, but like you're faking at being Tolkien.
This
But
was a real guy, apparently, or he's on the record. And so
yeah,
show me
that's
Livia. Show me Livia. I want to ask you about Livia.
okay. She's a beauty. Livia
Mm.
by one of my favorite Roman historians, Anthony Barrett, who is someone who wanted to he reevaluates the entire Julio-Claudian
My favorite
period.
dynasty.
And for example,
Actually,
he
no, Nerva Antonine, the good
he
emperors.
ends up
Stalker.
hmm, yeah, I like the Capetian. Um, but the thing about Livia is she is the wife of the greatest politician in history, and arguably one of the, I would almost say, one of the two great conquerors of Europe. The other being Charlemagne, but and Augustus Caesar, we still live in the post-Caesarian period, but it's not because of Julius Caesar. It's Augustus because Caesar, established his hold, but then died.
He is
And
the framework.
Augustus,
He sets the scene.
armed only with a name, yeah, and Augustus armed only with the name Caesar, with no real money, nothing really, sets out with what was it? A few friends and a legion of, I'd say, somewhat questionable loyalty, given Antonius has the money in the Senate and whatnot. So there is that.
Now, this is the first or the
But
second
with a
triumvirate?
name,
I'm
this
sorry.
is the
Sorry.
second.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm,
this
I'm
is in the lead up. And Augustus blazes his way forward with only Maecenas, Agrippa, and a few others.
Mhm.
Gets to Rome, gets himself deputized, and sent off to Gaul, where, and the rest is history. But eventually he
And
conquers and unites the
Gaul is
kingdom.
not a good assignment at this time, right?
Well, Marcus Antonius has gone up there to chase out the previous um, governor. Um, and you have the thing is, oh, I call him Caesar, but Caesar is having to defend the killers of Julius Caesar while burning with the desire for vengeance. So he's having to play this very complex game of politics while the Senate schemes to kill him.
Hmm.
So Augustus then turning his legions around, going back to Rome, forcing them to legitimize him. And it's well done in the Rome series, but Livia does not get the credit she deserves years and years later, around 37 BC, because by then she's become his mistress. But she does the one thing that all mistresses dream of. She graduates from mistress to wife. And
Ah,
from there, though, where previous girlfriends, a previous wife, and whatnot were never able to charm Augustus and never able to
if I may,
uh
if I may, Cleopatra was not able to charm Augustus.
exactly. But Livia did. And she's noted as being perhaps the smartest first lady who ever lived. She is
Mhm.
brilliant. She is someone who she um, she made herself seem like a trad wife while being a first lady, like a almost co-monarch to
She played the
Augustus.
role.
And it's the great gift that she played whatever role her husband needed, and her husband played whatever role he was needed. So, like, he would be a patron of arts, he'd be this, he'd be that, while she was
Hmm.
a patron of doctors and medical science and philosophers and whatnot. And she would intercede in certain court cases on, like, just when people were like, okay, listen, I really want your husbands to change the court and tell the court, show me mercy. They'd write to her and say, please, can you talk to your husband? She'd then turn to her husband and say, like, okay, I need you to intercede on this person's behalf, and Augustus would. She held enormous influence. But the other thing is, she's been smeared because Tacitus and others claimed she killed her husband, which was a dumb accusation, because she wanted Tiberius on the throne. And that she before that she killed Augustus's two grandsons,
Okay, I did not know
Gaius and
that.
Lucius. In reality, given that her child, yeah, people accuse her of it, but she didn't. She did not do it
Okay.
because all of her granddaughters were pretty much married to well, basically, her and Augustus kept intermarrying their families. Augustus's dream was to have a child with her. He didn't succeed. So he had like Julia marry Agrippa at one point, and then he was always working to weave together their families for nieces, nephews, and whatnot. And so what people forget is I think the love he did have for her. And I would suspect that had his grandsons lived, they'd have been married to her granddaughters. And this way they would share great grandchildren. This always seems to have been his policy because uh, every chance he got, he intermarried her, his best friend Agrippa, and his own family lines and interwove them together. He doesn't seem to have had any other consideration when it comes to the succession. So why would she ever try to knock off his grandsons when, honestly, she profits more? And we forget that they were removed from their mother's custody and put in her and Augustus's custody. So she played the role of mother to his grandsons. We forget there the bond there, and we forget that she had a vested interest in seeing them live. Because if they became great emperors, her granddaughters would be the wives of these emperors.
Hmm.
So that's something that Barrett really takes into account and says, let's stop the smear campaign, like with I Claudius, and let's actually stop being stupid. Because I Claudius is the most illogical series I've ever
You know I
seen.
love I Claudius, don't you?
Oh, I
You know,
didn't, but
I love. No,
I
no,
love.
that's okay. You know that I love Game of
Okay,
Thrones, the show. You know I
I
love
love,
those. We have different tastes.
I love the. Hey, I love Rome, the Rome series,
And that's
but
okay.
like
That's okay. De gustibus non disputandum est. In matters of taste, there
exactly,
can be no dispute.
exact. I gotta learn
Mm.
Latin, but the thing with I Claudius is the performances are perfect. So like Augustus's reaction when he finds out about his daughter's many adulteries, and his freakout is the best scene in all of Roman adaptations. Like, is there no one else? No, what is it? He shouts, "Is there no one in Rome who has not slept with her? Out of my sight before I do
I
something I
need to
will
reread
regret."
it. I don't remember that
Well,
part.
it's in the TV series. He shouts like, "Get them out of my sight before I do something I regret," because he's freaking out.
There's a TV
And
series?
yeah, yeah, it's really excellent.
Oh, I'm talking about
But
the
the
Robert
thing
Graves novel.
Well, the thing with the novel is it forgets well, what her
That's the
motivation
thing.
probably would
I'm
have been.
learning about Livia, even though I've read, here's two things. I've read I, Claudius, and the other one is Augustus, by John Williams. He has a very bland name, but and decent author. I'll tell you, I wonder if we can table this question. What is the last book you read that like you hated 3/3 of the way through and then like loved at the end? Have you ever had one of those? Um,
Yes, I have. Um, well, I think let me see. Um, oh, it's been so long. Probably one of the Colleen McCullough Rome series books, ironically enough. I
okay.
think it might have been one of her books. I hated it for the most part. Then I reached like the end and I went, oh yeah, I can get behind this. Um, Either that
Mhm.
or uh, I'm not I forget. There's well there's been a few books like that where I start off not liking it, then near the end I realized, oh, and I think that's really talent. That's a great skill on the writer's part. I don't think I could do
Mhm.
that.
I think you
But
could.
as far as I don't know, I'd prefer
When I tell you
my
that I'm a
readers to.
fan of, and I hope I'm saying this right, Draconiciad,
Oh yeah, the Draconikiad.
the
It's
Draconiciad. I when I say that to anybody who's listening, I was really impressed by it, and I love little. I'm a sentimentalist. I'm a romantic. I like the rhymes. I like the meters. I like the pretty stuff. If we're
yeah,
talking about the great American novelist, and we have Fitzgerald on one end, F. Scott, and we have Hemingway on the other, and you have the uber manly. He went. He grabbed his gun. The man was there. The man stood. And then you have you ever read The Great Gatsby? The uh,
no.
the kiss between Gatsby and Daisy. The night sounded as if someone had struck a tuning fork against a star. The kiss.
I love
That's
that.
me. That's me. I'm the Fitzgerald. I'm the guy. So these two were arguing. Great Woody Allen movie is Midnight in Paris, where you can see both of these, a fictionalized version of these characters interacting. And Hemingway is great because he's like, uh, don't ever tell me to read your work. The main character's a writer. Says you're Heming. He goes. He's sort of a time travel thing. But anyway, he's like, oh, I'm a writer. You're Hemingway. Oh my God, please, can you read my work? It'd be amazing. He's like, I don't want to read your work. It's either going to be terrible and I'm gonna hate having read it, or it's going to be good and I'm going to be jealous. And I always thought that was funny. Anyway, what I like about you, Joe, is that I take weird tangents that are probably very irritating, but you come back to the center, and that I think I need that. You keep me on track.
Um, I don't know. Honestly, I go on tangents when I'm on other podcasts. So I understand you when you're going on tangents. I
Mhm.
It's like I'm looking at myself in a way, what I
Okay.
do. But I think I think when it comes to writing, I like the man was there. He grabbed the gun. I find I get restless and frustrated. Whereas if like for example, let me find a certain section in the Silmarillion. I love the Silmarillion. I always come back to it.
I showed you my
Where is it?
copy,
Is it
that I
in
have there. There's no delay or anything, is there? I
Oh,
sometimes feel
yeah.
like if I'm
Here's
talking
my
or
Silmarillion.
ooh, I've seen your other copy too. So that's
No,
your hard
no, there is.
copy.
Yeah, I got
What?
several copies of Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings, and I've got translations, several copies, several different editions. I collect these when I see them, because um, each and every edition and copy and hardcover or paperback of Tolkien and Howard's works are to me, and even Homer and Virgil and others are to me more precious than gold. Um, and
Look what I found.
I,
You're gonna love it. Hang on. Look what I found.
ooh, I've got that edition.
And who's it by?
I've got it.
My man, my
Home.
guy. You know how much I love the Lattimore
Go!
version? No?
Uh-huh.
What?
Yeah, yeah. I know.
You know how much I love the Lattimore translations of these, right?
Yeah, you told me.
Yep. And I found this, and it's a beautiful copy, and I love the cover. I was so pleased to find this because I had somehow lost my Odyssey. That's kind of a poetic statement. I lost my
Oh,
Odyssey.
that that's a tragedy. Um, let's see. Oh, and you know what? It wasn't what I was looking for, but this is a good section. Uh, uh, oh, wait, here it is. But now a cry went up, passing up the wind from the south, from vale to vale, and elves and men lifted their voices in wonder and joy. For unsummoned and unlooked for, Turgon had opened the leaguer of Gondolin, and was come with an army 10,000 strong, with bright mail and long swords, and spears like a forest. Then when Fingon heard afar the great trumpet of Turgon his brother, the shadow passed and his heart was lifted, and he shouted aloud, Utulien, ore, aya eldalie, ar atanatari, Utulien, are, the day has come. Behold, people of the Eldar and fathers of men, the day has come. And all those who heard his great voice echo in the hills answered, crying, Alta e Lome, the night is passing. I love that part. I like the poetry versus like the more poetic attempt and
Delivery, though,
the plain.
amazing. Not a lot of people know this. When Tolkien gave his lectures, you may know this, he would stand completely still and then all of a sudden burst out with Beowulf yelling.
Yeah. Quiet!
He would walk
Like,
up in great ceremony and stand. And I always imagined him as a timid man, but he would walk out there and then people said it was amazing. Please go ahead.
well, he was timid because I had read up that his students found him odd, like the most knowledgeable professor in all of Oxford. But he'd so well, you see, this is important. Nobody would hear him. Nobody would hear him. Those that did loved him, but like I read up that oftentimes they were frustrated by him. They could hardly hear him sometimes. He was daunted. He wasn't a man to speak in front of a great crowd. He was a man who
Hmm.
fantasized about doing it. But the thing is, when you look at those who knew him, you get a man who is confident, masculine, and a, I would argue, the great wonder of England of his day. Um, because arguably, if Shakespeare was the soul of his age, Tolkien was the soul of his own age with regards to England. And this passage, like, I kind of look at
I'm just
um,
considering. I'm just
like
considering.
what happens is that poetry is like the Great Hills or the Highlands. It's beautiful, majestic. It grips you and it draws you in. Whereas what the flat, like the man was there, he reached for his gun. It does have its appeal, but it's a flat plain. It's not a mountain. It's not, um, you're not having to scale anything. It doesn't take as much of the effort that going full poetic and whatnot. So yeah, like um it I think in my first book, Callan Bulk,
Wait,
well, it
before we
wasn't
get
my
into
first
that, I
one.
want to touch on something
Um
because this gets into the AI component of what we were talking about a little bit. And I wanted to touch on this if that's okay with you, because you're talking about how you have a preference for more of that metric and poetic verse, right? But, and just in case we can share this maybe, whatever. But I shared with Joe, as I mentioned, the Draconic Iad. I want to make sure I get that right. Has become my favorite read because I love the moments in it, like the ones that I restacked with the flowing like milk and like unto flowing milk, silk, beautiful. Those are the things that I live for. I shared with Joe. I train AI machines. I use AI as a component of my process, and that's a discussion for another time. But one of the machines that I trained is a dumb machine, and it is a calculator. And all it does is ingest terabytes, petabytes, whatever the thing is, whatever the Greek thing is, of Western literary canon and literary thought. Longinus, theory on the sublime. Everything is in there. So all I do is, actually, if you try to get it to even do value judgment, as in I think this is good or I think this is bad, the Chat GPT or whatever the mechanism behind it will say, yeah, I'm not really good at that. I can't, I mean, I can tell you it's like this or like that, but I am a machine. So what this machine does is basically is to me the ultimate research assistant. These things start, and here's a line for you, ex nihilo. I don't mean to demean God when I say that, but they come from nothing. They're a little blank slate, a tabula rasa. And imagine if you were able to form kind of like Goethe's Zauberlehrling. Do you know this story? Most know it from Fantasia and Disney, where Mickey Mouse uh, or a character enchants a broom to carry water back and forth, but it quickly gets out of control.
I love
Um, it
love
you
this.
have this you have I call them my minions endearingly, but imagine that you're able to train a research assistant that basically can ingest all of like as more or less all of Western thought on um literary criticism. I ran the Draconic through this, and do not let me get away with saying that the wrong way. Draconic. Good?
Oh,
Yes.
Draconiciad.
Draconikiad. I see the Greek Draconikiad. But you're talking about kind of that truncated or staccato, right? Versus the legato, kind of like the Hemingway style, right? I learned so what people I don't hear people talking about, and I share a lot of the concerns about AI, but what I don't hear people talking about is the opportunity for discovery of new things. So you're talking about how you have this, you want to build the structure in it, that there's this ridge line. And yet I did not know. So I pumped in, all I did was copy and paste this wonderful epic. I put it into a dialogue, and then, or actually, I put it into a text file just to make sure it was completely kind of locked in there. And then I put in a prompt, and it was just written in plain English, but very clear instructions. I think I showed you a picture of this where I was just like, compare against all, literary tradition and give me a dry, raw analysis of how this fits and orients itself within the literary canon, right? And it returned a pretty good, I would say, precis of kind of what we're talking about. And this is what I'm ultimately getting at. I did not know. And so what I'm referring to here is a detailed description where I'll read the conclusion and then I'll make my point. So the conclusion, as drawn by this calculator that knows a lot about literary history, says the Draconiciad is a hybrid of classical, epic, medieval, heroic poetry and oral formulaic verse traditions, its engagement with Greco-Roman and Germanic traditions through epic invocation, genealogical catalogs, and mytho-historical interweaving positions it within the broader classical literary tradition. The inconsistent meters suggest an emulation rather than strict adherence to classical forms, aligning it more closely with later medieval heroic verse than with the rigidly metered epics of antiquity. I think that's a pretty good summary. And you may disagree, and
Yeah,
we can talk about that.
confident.
But the idea is, I had no idea that I knew that we have things like I was reminded I needed a refresher on what parataxis versus hypotaxis was, and I needed a refresher on what the go-to meter was for epic poems, which would be, well, I'm not going to spend much time looking for that, but one kind of the dactylic enammeters. But you're talking to me, there's a connection between that staccato kind of Hemingway-esque verse versus the Anglo-Saxon verse, um, which is less metric, but at the same time, you're using different components of speech, like alliteration, to get that kind of structure. I'll leave it there. Do you kind of get where I'm going with this? Because you're not a calculator, you're not a machine, and you can synthesize thoughts and understand.
Yeah, to an extent. With that one, I composed it line by line. I knew I wanted to go in one direction, and I it took me longer to compose that one than most of the other uh, books, but it usually takes me 2 weeks to compose one of these poems because um, it takes a while to
It's hard.
just because I tend to do. Yeah, it is hard. Um, I took some basic old Saxon, Anglo-Saxon stuff, as well as Alfred Tennyson's uh, Brunanburh, um, and I used these as to train my brain and whatnot, alongside what
Mhm.
I had read of old poems from antiquity and the Poetic Edda, of course, because I'm an avid, I'm in love with it. Actually, interesting thing, most of my students when I was teaching in Quebec were immense fans of the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. So the Poetic Edda is
And
immensely
please
popular
educate me on
in
what these
the
are, the poetic
Francosphere.
and prose eddas.
The Poetic Edda is a series of grand poems that retell the stories of the Norse gods. But the thing is, they're all told in poetic fashion. Some are just stories like of Vafthrûdnir, who challenges Othin, and the loser will lose his head. Othin wins in the end, but in an act of great chivalry, lets his foe keep his head. Because Othin is not a god without mercy. He's a very merciful god. He's not like Zeus. He lets him go and even says, all right, we can be friends, basically, for all intents and purposes. And you have Vafthrûdnir, who's moved, and, most giants are demons, so they're evil. But Vafthrûdnir isn't. So he goes on his way and just says, basically all but tips his hat and says, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. I like keeping my neck. Um, so yeah. But the thing is, you have the Havamal, which has a lot of morality and a lot of interesting ideas. And these grand poems are all stuffed together in one great book. And they were collected by Snorri Sturluson, who may have written a few of them. The
Mhm.
Prose Edda is a prose version of the Norse myths, and it is a wonderful read. So when I was teaching in Quebec, one of the most moving things was that in the first week, I had students begging me to talk to them about the Eddas, and I was stunned. And I said, "Well, how do you know I like them?" "Oh, we didn't. We just like them. We just want to. That's all we want to talk about in English. Why would we want to talk about anything else in English class?" And Uh,
What a gift.
I
That's great.
remember just being charmed by that and loving them for it. But yeah, all my students in Japan and Quebec have always been these passionate readers who are well read in things like Snorri Sturluson's Eddas, to Tolkien's Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings, to even stuff like Wind in the Willows and whatnot. That's in Quebec. In Japan, they're usually reading Lord of the Rings, yes, Hobbit, yes, but also what was it? I think most of them were reading um, various other children's books and like Samurai Tales, a folklore fairy story book from the medieval period, on their phones, Kindles, because their parent in Japan, the parents always give their kids phones.
Hmm.
But what's interesting is the kids never seem to go on I don't know, one of those point and whatever games. You never see that. I would
Mhm.
always see them when waiting for class to start. They would just be like, and this is down to 6 years old. These kids are reading voraciously. Whereas um, you teach college age women and boys, or I should say men, they're the ones playing on the phone. But children from the age of 6 to like 13, I found that they were just reading voraciously. So it's a great gift. But Draka Nikiad, um, um, and the lay of and the Song of Marioleth, my Greco-African poem, is are two very divergently different stories. Um, I like Draka Nikiad better nowadays. Um, and I do have a Buran Bora Alfred Tennyson poem I could share with you later. Um,
I
I
would
probably should
love
have
that. I
shared it
wrote a
before
poem.
this
I wrote two
podcast, but
poems addressed to the Greek myth of Danae. And one of my kind of, I call them allusions with an A, that I opened the poem with are these beautiful lines from Danae by Alfred Lord Tennyson, gorgeous, amazing poet. And I would argue ahead of his time in terms of innovations with verse. Personal opinion. But
let
anyway,
me.
the Draconicad. Oh, real quick. If anything will get me to shut up, it's leaving the room for one brief moment. So the floor is yours.
Ah, um, okay. So the thing with the Deccan Niciad is that it's supposed to be a great battle between um, Theodosianople, which is basically Constantinople, but it's a medieval well, a mythic version, a fantasy version, and uh, a barbarian kingdom on the move, I guess you could say, because Ragamund and his entire large clan and tens of thousands of other Germanic Bulgars are on the move because this isn't a kingdom of land but people. So the idea is they're moving into Achaia, the northernmost region of the Dorian Empire, or which are both Achaia is actually a butchering of Achaia. So I deliberately butchered the name so it'd be slightly different. While Doria,
We
very
call that we
easy
call that
reference to the Dor.
filleting when you're butchering deliberately.
Yep, and filleting. But Theodosianople, uh, well, the idea came from the idea of Theodosius rather than Constantine as a founder. Um, and I like the name Theodosion,
It's a great name.
Theodosius. Yeah, it is. And I figured, and Dan is the one really building up a lot of the lore and whatnot. And he had an idea for a story and for a character called Emperor Bessarion and the Sons of Bessarion. Dan just had
Mhm.
some great ideas with that. But what he wants to do is train himself as a poet. So he, I've been well, Draconicid was an attempt to also kind of get him to start. He did a few of the lines, and I'm using it to kind of train his brain a little in poetry. And the
Mhm.
thing is, um, it's a prequel to his story because his story is the vast uh, epic, which is a thriller, is a political drama, is a grand. Um, it's basically about the sons of Bessarion Draconicios, who is means the rising dragon. And the thing is, the three sons end up. The eldest son rules well, the second son doesn't. But the thing is, it's basically like the story of Lion King, except with brothers. And his idea, though, was I want to establish Bessarion Draconicos as this legendary general. How can I do that? And I devised the battle which Bessarion fights against Ragamund. And I devised Ragamund as this amazing, not villain, but antagonist. And
Mhm.
so you have the largest Germanic barbarian you could find of hundreds of thousands almost, versus a much smaller force of Greeks as they basically clash near a river. The battle begins with the um, Germanic forces, the barbarians, fording the river. And um, the great explosion of infantry and cavalry and whatnot smashing into each other. But the idea is to, in about 15 to 20 books, recount just the initial clash, the tug back and forth, and then
Mhm.
finally the a bit of the catastrophe that turns the tide. And as we show, Bessarion
Great
as a great
literary term.
general, yeah, and he turns the tide, and it and we see the effects of this victory. So like it starts with yes, Ragamon, but also his ancestry. Then we're going to get into and we get into the ancestry of even the lower captains and the
Wow.
great deeds of the sons of Ragamon and the great deeds of Ragamon's captains and whatnot. Then we're switching over to the Greek side and showing Bessarion and his ancestry and his wife's ancestry and all the great accomplishments of his captains and their ancestry. And just doing that, and so that you have the two sides, you know the two sides. It's like an actual history book, but in
You are
poetic
part
form.
of the
And
tribes,
what?
maybe. I
Yeah,
just said
so
you,
you'll be one of the
I just
tribes.
offered you are part of the tribes. That's all. That's
Yeah, that's how you're supposed to feel. And I myself have a great preference for the Greek side, but I'm French. I have a great fondness for the Greeks. We owe them an enormous debt.
we do. We do. What I
Greece
left,
has time and
what
again
I
saved slaves.
departed to get, by the way, Americans don't read dick. All right. So we can't even get people to read these. These are some of my treasures. These are graphic novels, Norse mythology, volume one. And these are by Neil Gaiman, a famous fantasy author whom I love. But we have to do a book exchange if you are amenable at some point, because I would love to, if you are not familiar, trade some of these. There are two volumes. This was actually, embarrassingly enough, I was raised on Greek and Roman culture, but I was not
Mhm.
familiar with Norse. Embarrassing as it may be, this was my main vector into that world, and it was a nice way to get into it. So I do recommend the Neil Gaiman
I
series, illustrated by P. Craig Russell on Norse Mythology volumes one and two.
Hmm. With mythology and those old folk tales, I was also raised on them. First, it was French, like the Great Matter of France, those sort of stories. Then King Arthur, and then the Greeks and the Norse. I remember at one point, I rapidly finish all my schoolwork and I just slip over to the computer in math class because we were occasionally permitted to use the computer. She was worried at one point that I was looking up porn, but then she saw the website I was on, and it was just pure Norse mythology, the Baldwin Project. And she was like, "What kept you like out? What are you looking at?" Oh, yeah, you're good. That was her exact word, like, not Tabon. And me,
Yeah,
what?
ball.
And she said, yeah, and she said, Tessie on here. Damn, you're boring. And but then she just, then in a later class, she had someone, how come he's allowed to use a computer and we're not? Because I know what you're likely to search, and I know what he's searching, and him, it's educational. You, it's
That's
not.
right.
And she even had that attitude with her own daughter. I thought it was funny. She was even harsh with her own daughter, who was liable to search that sort of stuff up. While I was just wanting to read Greek, Norse, Egyptian, and Japanese myths and legends, even Korean at one point. Um, so she thought I was getting a good literary education, even if I was in math class.
Yeah,
But
but
she
you
was a
were
very
though.
cultivated woman whose greatest sorrow was that her daughter, yeah, her greatest sorrow, though, was her daughter never took much of an interest in that stuff. Her daughter was pretty, but not very bright. And so this teacher was often disappointed and sorrowful in that regard. I think she took to me just because I may not have been as good looking, but I had the passion for art and literature.
No
Um,
cap, as the kids say,
but
when you
the
connected me with on LinkedIn, I was like, who's this guy? Not, that's not, I was like, it was a good ass picture. Dan, I believe, took it. It caught you in a good light. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, we were living in Quebec at the time. It was great. Um, but as for the epic poems, I have to admit, my first one is up on Substack. I was incredibly timid when I was putting it up. I was also timid about the Calabolg poems when I published the Calabolg novel. I should maybe just take the poems and put them up as a poetry post on Substack down the down the road. But those tell stories like of the kings of Eriu or love stories, or you've got Guilherme and Remus, and there you have epic poems about like the stupidest man in the kingdom who charmed a lady, things like that. So the idea when writing these novels was originally wonder if I can compose a poem. The no, because if you were to turn Lord of the Rings into a musical, it would make more sense. That's one thing I don't like about the Jackson
Well,
movies
the
is that
music
they
of
were not a
Eru
musical.
Elevator, is
There's
that the correct term? The music of Eru Elevator, that is the we cannot comprehend the workings of the divine, but the music is how we can maybe conceptualize something of that, right? And that's the
of
music.
it,
Or
but what I
am
no, I was thinking like the Tale of Gil-galad
right,
or
yep.
like
I
later.
was going for the lowest common denominator.
No, no, you weren't. You were going for the highest common denominator. But I was just thinking of the songs from Lord of the Rings. I think Samwise Gamgee, Aragorn, and others should have burst into song. They should have. It's there in the book. How come we can't have the characters singing on screen? And that's
Well,
what
I think
Tolkien
we
would have
both know
wanted.
why.
It would have made more. Um,
At
yeah,
least my
Viggo
answer is
Mortensen
because
can't sing.
audiences today would find it weird. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not
I thought it
saying that
was
that's
the
how
most
it
natural
should
thing in the
be.
world.
I get it. I just, one thing that's about me is I view myself, it's not up to oneself completely how one is defined. Um, but for my part, my side of the story is I'm a writer, period. Now, I'm a writer who is very much a fantasy fan and is writing a fantasy novel, but I'm a writer broadly. And I want to be desperately part of any community of fantasy authors who will have me and where I'm welcome. But at the same time, if my I have a more capacious view of what fantasy can be, And I think that you and I will agree on a lot of what the core remains, but I have a broader.
Mhm.
When I say broader, I mean I don't mean to make it mysterious. Think about Brandon Sanderson. You know, you may not like him. People may think of him as kind of, mass market kind of stuff, and that's not my aspiration. But I want to work on a kind of grander scale, and I want to work with new ideas within the broader structures, I suppose. So I guess like I forgot what I was getting on at this point, but it was important to me for some reason to emphasize that like I'm a fantasy fan, but like I read people like David Foster Wallace, who are prominent 20th century and 21st century American authors who would definitely, uh, when I say things like postmodernism and modernism, okay, I want to deracinate these words from the baggage that is on them. Because I'm talking strictly about the
Mhm.
classical literary tradition as I was taught in my liberal arts college. I went to the only public liberal arts college in North Carolina, and it was a fine education. I never met a TA, and God bless TAs. God bless them. But I only worked in small classes with professors, and that was a gift. And I was exposed to so much. Now, the point is, and studying abroad at Ruprecht Karls Universität in Heidelberg, Germany. And that's where I got to do one-on-one seminars with people who were old enough to have been, I would say, eight, six, seven during the outbreak of World War II. I got the opportunity to talk to some of the last people who were real, just middle class Germans watching this happen. But people who were professors emeritus specializing only in Kantian philosophy, to have one-on-one seminars with Dr. Hans Gunther Schwarz, who split his time between I don't it was it the University Manitoba? It was a prominent university in British Columbia, not British Columbia, in Canada, and he was bi-coastal. This guy was going between Heidelberg, which is the best university in Germany is arguably the University of Göttingen in Göttingen, but Heidelberg, especially for its law school, is very, very well regarded and is a top tier university. They don't quite work the same way. All German universities are very much very high quality places. But there are also very complex kind of gradations within all of that. The point is that I got this opportunity to learn from people who were telling me things like, you know, did you know that Julius Caesar's last words were actually not et tu, Brute? They were in Greek. They were kai su teknon, which means, and you too, my child. To me, that was a kind of a revelation, right? They were saying,
Yep.
yes, the Shakespeare is eloquent, right? That's wonderful. But you know that the Romans, they spoke Greek. This was the language of the educated patricians. And when Caesar was stabbed on the floor of the Senate, when the dark crimson of his blood spread across the marble of the Senate, and he looked up at his brother, basically, Brutus, and said,
Well, it would
Kai Su,
this
you
is,
too, my child. His adopted, is it you too, my son?
but
Kai Su Teknon?
you want to know something else? There were two Brutuses he looked on as the children,
Who's the other?
Decimus and Marcus. Decimus had been a lieutenant of his in Gaul and was a brute who liked to dress up sometimes as a Gaul because he went native a little. But this man was one of his most trusted officers alongside Marcus Antonius.
And that's
Decimus
Mark Antony.
desperately wanted, yeah,
As
I'm
as
sorry, I'm
we
used to
as
saying
we as
Antonius.
we simple provincials down here south of the border call him. We call him Mark Anthony.
Yeah,
He's one of those. He's one of
Mark
them
Antony,
singers, isn't he? Mark Anthony.
yeah. Mark Antony and Decimus Brutus were the two right-hand men with the army. But the thing is, Caesar had supplanted them in his will with Octavius. But the thing is, Decimus was in Caesar's favors, but he was one of the main organizers alongside Cassius of the entire plot. So
That is Cassius and Brutus,
now,
two of the three heads in Satan's mouth in Dante's Inferno. The
mm,
other, of course, being Judas.
yeah, I would argue there should have been Decimus in there too. So there's four great betrayers of history. There should have been, but yeah,
The ultimate sin, the ninth circle of hell. That was Dante. Dante identified that as treason. That's an interesting thing for me.
trahison. Um,
Betrayal. To me, that it got me thinking. I grew up. What's the worst sin? Murder, mass murder, uh, any number of kind of like. But then to kind of be exposed to that in school and be like, no, think about this. Treason against someone that you trust. Think bigger. I liked that.
well, the thing is, you're murdering a person. Um, Betrayal, you are murdering their spirit.
You're
Um,
murdering their faith in you, maybe.
the thing is, you're trying to murder their spirit in a way. Um, like rape is a violation of the soul as well as the body. But
Yeah.
betrayal is also a violation of the soul, but not the body
Mhm.
normally. But betrayal that leads to murder is
Not in
betrayal
Caesar's case,
is
unfortunately.
a rape in a way, in the at least in the classical mind. Yeah, like in the classical mind, it was almost synonymous,
Hmm.
almost. And this is where it's complex because a city can survive its enemies, but it cannot survive its traitors.
That's a good
It can even
line.
survive its tyrants, but maybe not traitors, as I said. That's from Cicero.
Nice.
Um, and um, thank you. But that's the thing. These ideas are ones that the Greeks and the Romans, bless them, were all knew far better than we. And Tolkien was also familiar with it. Alfred Tennyson, like these men were raised on the classics. And Draconiciad is an attempt to kind of emulate in a late medieval type style, like the AI said, of antiquity. But it's very different because because my epic poems are always these medieval poems. They're very medieval because well, as a child, before I even got to the Greek and Romans, I was reading the Arthurian, the Golan, the Carolingian epics. So for me, I was raised um, on the medieval
Hmm.
and on the Middle Ages. So um, it's a little funny. The first introduction to Greece I had was Hercules' Legendary Journeys with Kevin Sorbo. Um,
Yeah.
I still revere that series, but the the thing is, um, like some boys, their first hero was Superman or Batman. Me, it was Roland, Gawain, King Arthur, and even to an extent Philippe Auguste. So,
For my
my
provincial
heroes were
uncouth
later.
American ears, can we use our can you slum it? Can you slum it in the English bastardizations of those names?
Let me see. You have Roland, you have
Roland. Song of
Gawain.
Roland to the
I
Dark
always
Tower
say,
came.
yeah. And I always say Gawain just because I like the sound of the French version rather than Gawain. I do like Gawain as a name. Arthur, um, Charlemagne, of course, or Charles, Karl the Gross, or Charles
Charlemagne.
the Great, and you have Philip Auguste or Philip Augustus. the second, who was the King of France, who wrested back control of France from the Angevin, that is to say, the Plantagenet kings of England,
Oh,
who
see,
had
the
control of more of France.
Plantagenets are a major factor in my novel, so maybe we could come into conflict. You've probably heard me harp on and on and on and again about how it's the Angevin Empire.
Yeah, and it was a sort of empire. And I was also raised on Jeanne d'Arc, so like Joan of Arc.
Joan of
To
Arc. Yep.
Yeah, to a lot of English, she's the enemy. But to us French, she's more wonderful than Wonder Woman. She's France itself. She's Marianne. Like the very idea of Marianne, the personification of France as a figure, is basically modeled after Jeanne d'Arc. It's
May I
basically
take a risk
Jeanne d'Arc.
here? May I take a risk? I
Go ahead.
like I like the movie with Mila Jovovich. I like it. I think it's a good movie.
I hate that movie.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
it's I I cannot abide it. There's another movie made by Anglo-Americans. I think it was a co-production. It's from like 99 with this brunette girl from the US. I forget her name. She was very lovely. And it's
We've got
all in
so
English,
many.
but
Who
it's
knows?
very, very, yeah. But I'll have to send the link to you later. But
Well, send it to me.
there's
And
a
I,
figure I
I
wish
don't
I
mean to be a stickler on this, but I watched Centurion and you owe me a Knight's Tale. And I'm gonna get that Knight's Tale verification.
Okay, Knight's Tale. I will note. Okay, I got to be careful where I write this stuff down.
And you
Let me
can
see.
you can if you just can't stand it after two-thirds, you can turn it off, but give it a
I will.
chance.
I'll watch the whole
And
thing.
Geoffrey Chaucer is a character in a completely ahistorical role. In one of the most ahistorical depictions of any character, short of, I don't know. This is Geoffrey Chaucer's name was used. That is it. This guy. And
Yeah,
so you will be
I like.
listening to David Bowie songs, Adam and Evil Dance. So brace yourself, gird your loins, because you may not like it, but you're gonna watch it.
Okay. I'll watch it. And it's got
And I
James
will watch
Purefoy,
this. I will watch, yes, it does, as the Black Prince. And
but
who is a
you'll
fascinating
watch-
character. And I will watch this 1999 brunette Anglo-American Jeanne d'Arc.
yeah, it's I think Joan of Arc is what it's called, I think. But it's a touching thing. It's got that Irish actor who played Priam in Troy. What's his name? Um,
I know the face, but no, I don't know the actor. That's a deep cut for me.
One second. I got his name. I know it, but why am I Peter
You know,
O'Toole.
Oh God, Peter O'Toole, Peter O'fucking Toole. I loved the movie Troy. Sorry.
I love
I
that
liked it.
movie. Is
Yeah,
there no one else?
I liked it.
Every
Look at imagine me as Brad Pitt with about 200 extra pounds of muscle. The gods envy us. The gods envy us because we lose life. Ugh. And then like how about like it is too early a day for killing princes. Yeah, why do you have all that language there? Here, if I may, one of my illusions that I really love. If I can read this, this is
well,
just from the Iliad.
before you go, one of the and read it, one of the best lines. Um you won't have eyes. You won't have I mean, there are no pacts between lions and men. You won't have eyes. You won't have ears, and you won't have a tongue. You will wander the underworld, blind, deaf, and dumb, and all will know this is Hector, the fool who fought, he killed Achilles.
What a great,
And
like, come on.
it was his best performance ever. I love that movie.
And
Damn, I
also, I
love that
just
movie.
think, look, I'm an American, right? This is the land of, you know what? Who was it? Who was it who said that Las Vegas is the most honest city in America? I need to remember that. But Las Vegas, the most honest city in America, shitty food, rigged games, and wanton sexuality. That is the American way. We're a traveling carnival of nonsense. Now, the point is, when I think of you, I always think of the venerable Alexis de Tocqueville coming to democracy in America and just being like, well, there's some praiseworthy things, but I think this could go, I think this could go sideways. And I have to agree. Although I'm not not an aristocrat. I'm not a proponent of the aristocrats, as was uh, Monsieur de Tocqueville. But I have to. You can't. I mean, game recognized game. I can't deny the man had many points.
Mm.
A good conservative thinker, in my view, Alexis de Tocqueville. There are a few good conservative thinkers. Christopher Lasch among the modern ones who are conservatives who I follow. Christopher Lasch is dead, I think, but he wrote The Culture of Narcissism and a great little book on writing too, where he was just basically like he said it far more eloquently than this, but the message of the book was fuck the passive voice. Never use it. That was the message. Anyway, we were talking about Troy the movie.
Yeah. Well, it's they should have had a sequel with Sean Bean as Odysseus and in the
And
Odyssey.
then we should have had an Aeneid.
Yes. Oh man, I love the story of Aeneas.
Who would you
Um,
cast as Dido?
oh,
Because
okay.
I'm fine with
So,
Orlando Bloom as Aeneas. I'm fine with that. Because he was Aeneas in
hmm,
Troy, you know.
Orlando Bloom. Okay. No, he was
I mean,
Paris.
if you want to cast Aeneas
He did
too, by
Paris.
all means. Who?
Hmm, this is
Oh
hard.
wait, you say Paris.
Let me
Oh,
see. Uh, um, let's see. Um, let me see. I'll just I'm
I try to think like
just
to
gonna
me Dido. Okay, so I think
I would
otherworld.
say
To me, Dido evokes otherworldly, almost like a woman who's been raised in isolation. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. She's a
Distant
woman
and yet
who
involved. I don't know. Personal. I don't know.
she's initially cold, but she melts before Aeneas. Aeneas. Aeneas, I would probably say Eric Bruno from Crépuscule d'un Tueur. Um,
Crepuscular, which would
or un
mean
Tueur.
night.
He did an amazing job. Um, ben Crépuscule or pour un Tueur is Dusk for a Hitman. It's about
Ooh, that's
history's
a cool
greatest
name.
hitman who was Quebecois, and um, the the killer in question killed about 77 or 79 people in the span of uh 5 years or so.
What?
And the yeah,
Those are like
he killed
American
that many
numbers.
people from
This country's good at fucking killing
1979 or
people. Those are
something to
American
80.
numbers, man. Sorry to be crass. Sorry to be
But
crass.
the thing is,
I'm a patriot and I have a very fraught relationship with what is happening in the country.
he was never actually caught, so to
Oh,
speak.
really?
He handed himself in because the mob asked him to kill his own younger brother.
Oh,
And he then
there's a
went to the
line.
police and said, I'm, yeah. But on the other hand, he was such a skilled hitman, the mob feared a clash until they asked him, "Can you kill your younger brother? He's a nuisance to us." And he strangely broke down, almost got on his knees and begged them, "Don't make me do it. He's my brother." Yeah, but you don't like him. But he's my brother. I can't do that. There's a line.
Fratricide.
Oh, well, okay then. You go talk to him. Then they commission 4 or 5 other hitmen to kill him. Those men go after him, and he evades them. I won't reveal how. But the actor, like we know, is perfect. He's spot on in the role. Um, I would probably cast him. He's a popular Quebecois actor. Man, he's so good. I'd say either him or I don't really know American actors
So
anymore
he's going to be your
and
Dido, is
actresses.
it?
Um, no,
Just
he's
joking.
my choice for Aeneas.
Of course, I
Um,
was making a joke or trying to.
but yeah, it's okay. Dido, I have no idea. Oh, it is so darn hard because you need someone young enough
Mhm.
and someone in their 20s or something so that
What
is
about that
at
chick
the
that
height
was
of,
in Centurion?
but it's hard because um
The beautiful one, blonde, blue eyes.
oh, she's okay, let me look her up.
She,
Um
to me, she'd be a good Dido. I
uh
mean, she's blonde. We're talking
Centurion
about Carthage, but
movie.
Dido's Queen of Carthage, right? Don't let me go crazy here.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just see. What's her name? Darn it. Um, let me see.
I mean, by the way, thank
No,
you for
not
that movie
her.
just for it. By the way,
Um,
Etain and that their helpful necromancer, Etain and the necro worth the price of admission.
hmm.
Two beautiful women
Oh,
in this movie, I'm saying.
she might be good for the role. Imogen Poots. What an odd name.
I
Um,
love the first part of it. I can't
okay,
say that I'm that
her
taken
name
with the
is
second. I love the name Imogen, though.
yeah, her name is a joke. Imogen Gay Poots.
Now that's a British
Imogen Gay
fucking name for
Poots
you.
is her full
This
name.
the British Isles are the name are the
It
provenance of Imogen Gay Poots and a guy, an MP named Dick Pound. I shit you not. There's a guy in the government named Dick Pound.
Oh my God.
Now, in this
Like,
country,
like,
I will stack ridiculous Southern names. The South within the United States, a lot of people will tell you that or claim that the United States has no aristocracy. The United States has no legal aristocracy. There is an
we have a caste
aristocracy.
system.
Oh, of course there is. I completely agree. Now, now it's an American caste system. So it's a strange
Yeah.
mixture of new money with old kind of money, but nobody's money's that old. And it's a kind of aristocracy that's a little bit kind of like, I mean, we're rich, but we don't have the track, they know they don't have the, I don't, I'm ambivalent on the topic of nobility as such, but they don't have the I can trace my lineage back to Charlemagne kind of thing going on. Like they're like, we came over here, got
No, they don't.
rich. You know what I'm saying? Like they're kind of and like maybe it's
Yeah.
like the Johnson and Johnson family, and they're rich and powerful. They know all the things, but they're American nobility. They're new money, in terms of like
Yeah.
even if you go
Yeah.
back like that's the weird American thing, but there is very much a very strange and fluid at the same time intransigent American class system. And it is very important to mention that the South, which I define as which the traditional definition would be south of the Mason-Dixon line, that is the line between the United States of Virginia and Maryland. It cuts kind of right across. That's the division where things like the Civil War happened, more or less. And that culture in the Southeast, pretty much between Texas but not including Florida, you've got Virginia down to Georgia, and then west to Louisiana. Louisiana, that's tricky. We're getting into a different caste system because that's where we're getting into, obviously, a tremendous French influence. But I would say to Alabama by far, which is one giant fucking farm. Sorry, Alabama. The point is, though, that's where Dr. Martin Luther King came from, a fundamentally important man and a man of peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, and that he was a man of peace, even when cinder blocks were being thrown at him. And that's what Alabama is, or it can be. Um, anyway, the South has its own caste system. There's a very much more rigid class system in the American South, and it comes out of the Cavalier influx from. I know that the English had many civil wars, but the most famous one, the one dramatized in Milton, the Cavalier influx under William Berkeley, then the governor of the colony of Virginia, a massive influx of Cavaliers came in. These were the Cavaliers, by the way, a couple definitions here. The Cavaliers were a kind of like, I don't know if dragoon would be the right type of thing, but they were like their own military culture of cavalry, mostly of aristocrats and gentry, well
Mhm.
off people within the royalist army. These were not uniformly noblemen, but they were pretty much uniformly people who were knights and who owned maybe at least a little bit of land. Remember, at this point in British history, we're starting to get into the era of what are called the landed gentry. These are non-noble people who are kind of like a middle class. That's where my ancestors come from. They were Welsh landed gentry. They didn't have much land, but they had enough savings and wherewithal to very early make the passage across the Atlantic into what is today Virginia. Now, there is a very, those Cavaliers, and I know you love this, and those Cavaliers, this would be an interesting study. I swear, I don't mean to make it all about the United States, but I mean this very specifically. It would be an interesting study for you or someone else to talk about this very concentrated influx of landed gentry and nobility who came in and sought to remake the Chesapeake Bay in the image of the aristocracy that they had lost, right? Cromwell is ascendant, you know. This is Cromwell is up, right? Cromwell will fall for all the reasons he falls, but this is not a good time to be a royalist. They kill Charles II. I believe I've got the right ordinal number there, but I'll pause there. But an interesting thing is there is even a subculture of aristocracy within the aristocracy of the United States. And I say aristocracy in quotation marks because it's American.
Yeah. Uh, the the sad thing is though that Europe also got rid of her old money, her old aristocracy. I actually think Europe would be better off keeping all that. Asia, well, maybe not Asia. Japan, I should say, kept theirs. And
Really?
like the Fujiwara, the
I
Imui,
know
they're still
nothing
standing.
about
They're still
Japan. I know
there.
nothing.
Here's something interesting. Um, the samurai are said to have disappeared with the Meiji Restoration. The descendants are still there. They're the heads of the big corporations of Japan, and they make the decisions. They get together and they talk with politicians, and you know, it's obvious who's making many of the decisions in government in Japan. A lot of times it's these bankers and corpos and these politicians all descended from samurai. So
Mhm.
people want to talk about, well, there's no shogun today. How many of them want to bet are descended from the Tokugawa? But
Do you know how,
I
oh,
bet you
sorry,
anything else
finish
in
your
the
thought,
bottom.
finish your thought.
Um, but there's, but no, it's just, I was going to say, we somewhat got off topic and to veer us back onto uh, poetry, I think that the sad thing with poetry is that Um, Many compose poems of love, of friendship, or of nature, or what have you, but we don't see much. Um, like the last real serious attempt I think someone made at a epic poem of glory and beauty was Tolkien with the Lay of Leithian, which is a recounting of
Okay.
the story of Beren and Luthien in poetic format.
Does
He never
anybody
compl
have better
he
names than
got he
Tolkien? Can we
stopped
just
after a few
agree that there's
trantos.
never going to be a better namer of anything than Tolkien? There's never like
Yeah, the
names
only
in
one who rivals is
fantasy.
Howard.
Like there's never, I take a lot of pride in my naming. Sometimes it's a little bit random, sometimes it's not. But I'll tell you,
Mm.
there's no better. Maybe there will one day rise an heir to Tolkien, but I don't know if there's ever going to be a better namer of things.
Mm. That's fair.
Of
Only Howard
poetry, what's the
rivals
sad
him.
thing?
Only in the context I like the name Aqu. Well,
Okay.
we don't have anyone who's been trying to make these Homeric grand epics. Like we've got Germany, which has Parzival from the 13th or 14th century. We have um, Milton with his Paradise Lost. We've got um,
There are two in the United
we've
States.
we've got Beowulf. We got
Mhm. There are one and a
there's
half
two
founding there are one and a half founding myths
to
of the United States that have been one has been completed and is the stand-in myth until a better one comes along. My favorite poet of all time. If you are ever interested in a case study of a genius who failed to create an epic poem, a man who is a genius and was a genius and is categorically, without question, my favorite poet of all time, I will nonetheless say that he endeavored to create a myth for America and an epic poem, and he failed to do so. And so I say that America has one unfinished
mm,
founding myth poem. So, number one, the classic will not surprise anybody who's familiar with American literature and verse, Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. It's kind of like this. If you've been to any lit seminar one-on-one, Walt Whitman's kind of panegyric to nature and the earth of the soil, the fact that it was written and rewritten and all of these things. I find it an insufficient, by far, epic myth. What Hart Crane was doing would have been, and it would have been one of the greatest pieces of art if he had had the wherewithal to do it. I don't know if he lacked the wherewithal, or it was because he died too young. He died at 33. Um, but it is unfinished, and it is, I imagine, one of those rusty oil tankers at the end of Planet of the Apes sitting out in the desert, you know, like a great unfinished relic. Ozymandias, behold my works, ye mighty, and despair. And if you're ever interested in, you can talk about the Aeneid. Virgil knocks it out of the park. He accomplishes the epic. Hart Crane in the 1920s and 30s of the United States attempts it, tries, and fails. And I've always been fascinated by it. While I shut up, I'm going to go collect my copy of Hart Crane just to show it to you. We don't have to read from it, but I just want to show you what I'm talking about.
well, I just think we need to start making these grander epics. Marioleth is a practice attempt. Um, the Draconiciad is a more hardcore attempt, but it's basically supposed to be metal, as I think someone once described it.
I can still hear
And
you,
it's
by
supposed
the
to
way.
be very,
Easy
very
step
Greek.
on that.
I'm wanting to do a Well, I was composing two great epic poems in French till I stopped for a time, and I'm going to be going back to them after I finish Empire of Shadows and a few other projects. But those are two French poems. One is L'Illusiade, the Eluniad.
Okay. I mean, Iliad in there.
Eluniad is what I should say. Elu, um, a le uh, the lay of Fevonoe a David, which or the lay of Fevonoe. Basically, Fevonoe tells the story of the star dog, Fevonoe, who attaches himself to an extent to Feolanville, a elvish prince. But the elvish prince's wife her is killed and her soul is taken by Hela, queen of hell, Niflheim.
Yes, of
And
course, from the Marvel
Feolanville
movies.
decides he's going to go rescue. I was thinking Norse mythology.
No,
But Feolanville
Thor, right? That's the same thing.
sets out to,
This is a joke. This is a
yeah,
joke.
pretty much. Feolanville sets out, I know, he sets out to rescue her soul, and he's accompanied by the Star Dog. Um, and the story is that in the end he succeeds, but he's so badly wounded, as is Feonoe, that when they finally make it back to the Elvish kingdom, to Elfines, they fall over dead and they lay down in the snow and die together. And
That's incredibly touching.
the gods then make a constellation of them.
That
Well, the thing is, though, Fivonoe is inspired by my who has brindle on his paws, so it's
Hmm.
an epic poem devoted and dedicated to my dog, but so that he might live forever.
Which is, by the way,
Um,
adorable. I'm sorry. I was
and
paying attention to
well, I
every
intend to
word
have
that you were saying, but I could not find my copy of Heart Crane. I did find Leaves of Grass, though. If anyone is interested at kind of like the going critical consensus of what the American founding epic poem is, you can find it here, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. You can probably find this for free anywhere online, actually. We were talking about this earlier. This is a book that I got three-fourths of the way through. This is Augustus by John Williams, published sometime in the 60s, maybe 70s. It's
I
an
know it.
epistolic novel, which I usually do not like, but I got toward the end of this and really enjoyed it. I can't remember Livia that much from this, which I don't know if that's a good thing. Probably not.
I don't know.
But we
She's
were
very well
talking about a
portrayed.
wonderful anecdote about how you're writing an epic poem about your dog, and God, we're going to talk about that.
Well, it's just he's adorable, and I want him to. Well, I intend to have him baptized down the road because you can now have your dog baptized. I can't resist.
Of
This
course,
way, he'll be
yeah,
amongst us.
and he'll love it.
Because well, there's an old French belief that dogs are true Christians, truer than men, and that there's an old phrase I once heard: "Quand tu regardes dans leurs yeux, tu peux voir tout l'amour de Dieu." When you look into their eyes, you can see all the love of God. And that's what I believe. I think God, I think, well, in English, dog and God are reversed from each other. And dogs are the most
What are the
beautiful
words?
creatures ever. Yeah. And it's just, mine just changed my life. So I have to make him an epic poem and
A
immortalize him
dog
as
will save your
Fivonoe.
life. A dog will.
Um, yeah.
Do
And
you
save your
like, do you
soul.
like, do you like any
And
of
because where
the
would we
kind of
be with
contemporary? I'm so sorry. I feel like there's a delay. I feel like I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I like some dog books, like Call of the Wild by Jack London.
Oh,
I love that
okay,
book.
Jack London's a classic.
Oh yeah. And the best Canadian writer who was never Canadian.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And I get that. I get that. I do.
He's
Well,
from
I don't want to run out of steam too much. So I'd like to reorient the conversation back to Poetry,
I
the
was
dracon. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna finish by saying about the other French poem I'm composing. It's inspired by where Vivonaway is just meant to be inspired by a bit of Baron and Luthien, with a bit of, I guess, just the idea of how far would you go for love, the love of your wife or the love of your dog. The Illusionnade um, is the idea of a what I call the Roi d'Or, the Golden King, who appears in my Chute d'Innocence novel as a child and will appear in later books. He is the greatest and grandest of kings of his generation, and so he's called the Golden King. He's an architect, he's a poet, he's a historian, but he's also a linguist, and he's a elf friend, and he's the man who pulls the sword out of the stone. He is obviously modeled after King Arthur. But the thing is, he believes he's contaminated by sin at one point, and mourning the loss of his first wife, he abandons his second and leaves her and his mother as regents, sets out to on a royal pilgrimage to basically try to find his way back to himself and cleanse himself of sin. What he doesn't realize is there is no sin. His first wife's death was not his fault, but he believes it to have been. So he sets out and he's lost for a year or two. And while he's gone, he ends up suddenly stricken with the desire to go back home, like Odysseus. So you can
Mhm.
see a bit of the influence of the Odyssey. So once he reaches the holy place, the holy city, he then carries on to Theodosianople, thinking, I'll carry things from the, no, I'll go from the holy city to Theodosianople now. I'll go even further, away from home. But then he ends up getting lost from island to island and then has to try to make it back to his home
He has an
because he's suddenly
odyssey.
stricken by homesickness.
Now,
Yep.
this kind of
Um,
confuses me a little bit because this ties into Baron Cub, which you also described as a sort of odyssey. Maybe this is a prose odyssey versus a verse
yeah,
odyssey.
yeah, it is. Baron Cub is prose, and it's also inspired by Wolf and Cub and the conquest of Britannia by the Saxons, the Great Saxon
Yes.
Conquest. So Daniel had a bit of the inspiration first, and then he and I have been co-writing it, and it's a story about a father and a son going off on a blood feud, but it's also about they've become disconnected
I wish
at the
my
start.
dad and I could go off on a
And
blood feud. I feel like that would have got our relationship would have been a lot better if we could have jointly pursued a blood feud.
not with me, please. But
No, no, no,
I guess
no.
I'd
You're
be
no
played
blood
well.
feud. No, some villain from my past. That's who I'm after, not you. Not a person that I
Okay,
can read the Iliad to. I've never read the Iliad aloud to anyone ever in
really?
35 years on
I've
this
never
planet.
I've never read it aloud to anyone either, except my dog.
So listen, no matter what our disagreements are, no matter how many times I will put my foot in my mouth, okay? I'm going to forewarn
Uh,
you. That's something that I do often when I'm not talking.
yeah.
It is putting my foot in my mouth. I forgot what I was talking about. See, we need you, Joe, because I am a kite, and a kite without a tether is, a UFO.
UFO. That's a good one. I'll have to remember that one. Oh, I've
It
never heard
sounds
that one before.
fancy, like I'm a kite, I'm flying, but let go of a kite and see how fun a kite is.
Yeah, fair. Oh man. But Illusionnade is also about like Illuron, the Golden King, gets separated from people, even from the knights who accompanied him because he didn't want to bring his knights with him. But about
Oh, I
12 of
wanted to
his
say,
knights,
you're the last person I'm blood feuding, okay? Because Iliad, I'm not blood feuding that.
fair, same. But yeah, so he gets separated, he gets homesick, and his knights are, while he's trying to make his way back home, his knights are trying to make their way to him and find him. So
Interesting.
in the end, reunite with them, they'll get home and do complete the Odyssey. But um, but Baron Cub is a much more prose version, and it's drawing inspiration from the Odyssey, obviously, as well as Saxon stories and tales and whatnot, and the Saxon conquest, and Wolf and Cub. But in the end, that one is about, and also Beowulf, but you have Hrothgar and Sigewolf. I named Hrothgar, and Dan ended up naming Sigewolf. And the thing is, Hrothgar is not a tender man; he's a hard man. Um, and actually, we ended up finding his voice by thinking up a scene that we've not yet written, where he's confronted by cowardly men, and he just says, "Is there not a man amongst you? Fight me, kill me. Is there not a man amongst you?" They'll all just stare at him, look at the sword he tossed them, and back away. And that's when he'll just grind his teeth and say, "Very well.
Nice.
If you refuse to live on your feet, you will die on your knees." And
What a
yeah,
great,
he's a
can
man
I
who
say
respects only
a great
valor and honor
turnaround? Can
and
I say a great
courage.
turnaround too? Because we talk a lot about live on your knees or die on your feet. You know what I'm saying? Like bend the knee and you'll
Yeah,
live.
yeah, and that's,
Stand up. You reversed it.
but he wants, yeah, he wants them to stand up for themselves. And he'll say, because he has them well, he's got them all with swords at their throat. And he says, well, not exactly at their throat, but he's like, "Stand up, fight me, fight me. I want you to be men." Because he's like, he's a Saxon conquering the Bretons. And he's like, "I want you to fight for yourselves. I want you to defend your children. Don't beg me for mercy. Fight me. Defend your village. Defend your woman. You have to be men." None of them listen. And he says, "Fine. Then I'm." But the thing with Hrothgar is when he does come across people who are like, "No, I'll fight you to the bitter end," he says, "All right, I'm willing to negotiate." It's just he respects valor and strength, but he sees it as you have to be willing to fight. If you want me to negotiate with you, I have to respect you. If I don't respect you, I'm not negotiating with you. But
Oh yeah.
on but this is something he also tries to impart to his son, but he's not very good at it. He's clumsy, he's rough. And um he's also a grieving father who's lost his eldest son and his daughter. And so he's a man who's traumatized, and his son is traumatized, and they're not connecting like they should. But on the other hand, when they finally do it, the idea is going to be that it's a moment of beauty. And well, I can't. That was another scene Dan and I have already outlined, but we've not yet written. It's that they are Hrothgar and Sigewolf need each other. They're father and son. They have no one else. And even if they have other family, like if they start new families or whatever, the only ones who remember Hrothgar's first children is Sigewolf and Hrothgar. They're all each other have that
The
left.
ties
They
that
need
bind.
each other. Yeah. And um, the thing is, Sigewolf himself grows to be up to be a fairly rough figure because his suffering and his sorrows, turn him into the man he becomes. But Hrothgar, um,
Steel sharpens steel, my
deep down
friend.
wants better. Yep, the old European phrase, yeah, steel sharpens
Hard
steel,
men
iron
make
sharpens
hard
iron.
men.
And
Hard times
but
make
Hrothgar,
hard men.
yeah,
Stuff like
and
that.
uh, and yeah, Hrothgar wants his son to be bolder and braver, but also more blessed than him. But
Mhm.
he kind of fails in that regard. But courage and victory in life take sacrifice. Um, but yeah, with the Drakanikiad, um, that's another story of a hard man having to make hard decisions and whatnot. But much, well, I'm at like book 3 or 4, and much as Bessarion hasn't really appeared quite as prominently. Um, Ragamund, originally we were planning as just a one-off character, but now he's going to be a very important,
Don't you love
well, his
those, the
lineage is
little
going to be very,
characters that turn into have the lives of their own?
yeah, I do. Ragamund is going to be a very influential character whose shadow haunts Dan's Greek epic. So that's where there was this
That's a
plan.
cool
He'd just be a,
dynamic.
yeah, and so he goes he goes from being a secondary unimportant antagonist to now being like this major influence whom the Empire has defeated. It is now like 40 years after, but the Empire has no enemies. And you now have an empire that's kind of, it has conquered its enemies. Who is there left? It is without
And Alexander
equal.
wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. Hans Gruber, Die Hard.
Yeah, yeah, and that's basically it here. But on the other hand, Bessarion went from someone who Dan was planning had certain ideas to now someone who weeps because well, when he's dying of old age, he's weeping at one point, and he's asked, "Why do you weep, sire?" And him like, well, he because he weeps for his enemy, and he's asked, "Why do you weep for a man dead 40 years whom you slew?" Because who will remember Ragamund when I am gone? Who will remember the nobility and heroism of his sons when I am gone? But you killed them. Yes, I did, and I loved them. They, my valor, my name was not a gift given to me by an empire. It was a gift given to me by Ragamund and his sons. I won it through them, and thanks to them. I owe them my crown, and I weep for them, for there were no nobler enemies of our empire. So the idea is he goes from a man that had one set of ideas to a man who on his deathbed is just going, you know, I like those guys, and where he weeps for them, and he just says, like, you have him. Will my son have an enemy of that worth and quality, of that
Will my
substance?
son be
I wish
tested?
him to have one. And he's like,
Will
yeah,
my son
he's
be
like, I want my
tested?
son to be tested. And yeah, and Dan uh basically has the idea that it's like, but your son is as ferocious as Achilles, as noble as Heracles. A father may think so, but fate may test him differently and may prove him otherwise. I
I
would
like
have
that.
him
That
be
should be a
greater still.
line. That
But
should be a line in it.
yeah, yeah, and Dan's got a lot of ideas for his Greek epic, but the epic poem I'm trying to craft as a great epic. But the story
Mhm.
with the great poem is that this is actually a nobleman, a lesser nobleman's son or centurion's son, who the centurion died, and Bessarion took in his son as an act of kindness, as a foster son. And that foster son then went on to become a poet, and he's singing this during a feast to Bessarion, who is smacked dumb with shock at this poem this man has been composing in secret for him. And where that's a narrative in the story, and where Bessarion leaps over the table and goes to embrace him in gratitude and says, "You have immortalized my victory. You have given me my victory anew," or something to that effect. Like, you've given me my victory again because it's the victory that won me my crown, but you've now given me my fame to this foster son of his who's been composing a poem for like 15 years. So the idea is, in this case, uh, in a way, a foster son does more for the foster father than vice versa. But
Mhm.
the but I had not thought to do a prose version, but you suggested it a while during this podcast, so I'm going to have to now.
Here's an interesting AI
I
question.
know with my Mary left poem,
Here's an interesting AI question. I did suggest it.
what?
You're considering it. You may or may not do it. What if I were a chatbot?
Sorry, what? Could you repeat that? You broke up for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. We just had a dynamic, and let me know if I misunderstood, where you were referencing like we had a discussion. I suggested something, and you were thinking, oh, that might be something to consider, right? Were we not talking about that? You were saying that
Oh yeah, the AI thing. Uh,
I had a minor influence on an idea maybe that you were going to pursue. If I'm mistaken, don't let me
yeah,
know.
the AI thing. Well, I simply meant AI can be used to analyze your own poem, and you can use that to further accentuate the themes and the ideas and whatnot. Because I liked what I saw from that Safari bot of yours and your minion, and I
My
thought it
minions.
was I thought it was all complimentary. I thought I was flattered and moved. So
Well, the
I
thing
think that's
is, it
something.
doesn't come in with criticism. Its instructions are very strict. This is a piece of
Mm,
content, and I don't like that word to describe what we do. But when I'm talking about my minions, I tell them this is content. You are not to see this as verse or prose. These are characters, all right? Now, um, run through the characters, come up with your analysis against your knowledge of the Western canon. You in some cases you are actually verbatim telling this minion, this bot, you are an expert in medieval Byzantine history. Describe
hmm
what the likeliest recipe for Greek fire would have been, for example, to add an element of realism, right? So you don't copy and paste that. You say, oh, I did not know that. And I'm picking a random chemical. Sulfur would have been a part of it. I did not know that. And yet now there's this sort of thing. And more to the point, I had no idea personally about this epic that I found through this chatbot. In absorbing the canon, this machine, and I want to emphasize again and
hmm
again that I talk about these things in a very deliberate way. I talk about them as my minions. I talk about them as my bots, my machines, my calculators. I even call them dumb. They are tools. I talk about making AI your bitch because these are your tools. And it's been 18 months that I have been building some of these things. What I would love to do is I've broken down. I will be starting a new publication that is called Genre Growth. And it is going to be a paid subscription where I talk about all of this and more. I take a decade's worth of successful sales and marketing experience and I run it right alongside separately from my genre work, which I publish at the same time. And so people can see the proof in the pudding and whether or not there's true growth there. AI will be a big component of it. What I wanted to do is you, of course, get free comps for whatever, but I wanted to offer your audience 25 free comps if they are interested for, I don't know, 6 months or whatever the thing is, for you to decide, you to disseminate if you want, how you want, however you want, um, for people to come in. The only thing I would ask of you is this. I'm sure you have a
hmm
diverse audience, and many among them maybe this is me. This is me bringing judgments. I worry that there might be some people who kind of come in just to troll it, and I understand. I understand. I want to have a discussion about AI and where it ends and where it begins. And if we need a bright line in the sand, I draw it at generative. Generative AI means it's making stuff for you. So that's where I draw the line.
Yeah, you do that.
Now, but what I wanted to
Yeah.
do is, if you are open to it, I wanted to offer, and the reason that it's 25 is I wanted to, if you'll, again, these are yours to distribute if you want, how you want, but I would love it if there are people who, they need to have good writing. That's key because I don't want to be in the business of drawing people into your work only to have them be there and be like, what am I doing? They need to have good writing. I would humbly request that these people have good writing. And number two, Be motivated and open-minded. I am not looking for sycophants. I am not looking for yes men. I am looking for people who will push back, who will say, I think, what about this? What about that? I'm looking for people who have maybe, a few tens of followers and who are willing to put in a little bit of work to be a test case and to see for themselves for free whether or not there is of any value. And the last thing I would ask of these people and of you is this. If they do, the subscriptions are theirs and yours, regardless of what anyone says or reports back or reviews. But what I would ask is if people would put forth the effort to maybe put a little bit of content out there saying, I've been participating in this and I've found it valuable in X way. Or, and this is fair, I've been participating in this and I think that this is a bad approach. The subscriptions are people's and that's it. But
I can
I would
I can
ask for
already
that kind
tell
of
you,
yeah.
I was going to say I can already tell you I know of about three or four who will probably be curious and will give some pushback, such as Bill Hiat, Man Behind the Screen, Catherine Elaine,
I'm nervous
Mercedes.
about Bill
These are
Hyatt
people.
or Hiat. He's somebody who, whenever I write, I'm like, I need to impress this guy.
Oh yeah, same. I always get so freaking nervous when he said when I see Bill Hiat in my notifications and I go,
When I see one of
oh
his
no,
reviews, I'm like,
yeah, I know.
luckily
I
they've all
get
been positive. I gave him a free comp
same.
to my add-on story, which is Mad to the Spy, which is a subplot about a spy working her way up from the kitchens into a lord's household.
That's
Which,
great.
by the way,
But
you're yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say, I remember when he first came to me, he was reading Olymp no Machi, my Silmarillion-ish epic, and I later found out he was writing his own Greek and Greek myths and whatnot stories, and he ended up just reading all of Olymp no Machi, giving me feedback on every chapter, point by point, and ah, like um, Olymp no Machi is a rewrite of my very first ever writing project from when I was like 17 to 19. I rewrote it at about 26 or 27. And I hadn't shown it to anyone. And I was always fearful it's going to suck. People are going to hate it. Bill comes in and champions it. So
Hmm.
he's honestly a man I really admire. Um,
His reviews are thoughtful.
Catherine, oh yeah. Oh yeah. He's someone who used to teach English. He's one of the most knowledgeable men I know about the English language over on Substack. The man,
Hmm.
like I hope in 30 years or something, I'm in the same place as him and Ben Westenberg to an extent. Um, although
But people
Ben
like Eric Falden are
Westenberg
people I'm
is
trying to build connections with, who
he's
is
writing
somebody
a
I respect. Do you know Eric
I really
Falden?
admire
Do you know
Falden.
this person?
Eric is yeah, I know him. He and I have done essays back and forth a few times. I'm currently
I'm trying to
doing because
connect with him.
he
I'm trying
wrote
to meet
all
with him.
about the
Maybe you could
fairy
broker
stories
a, yeah,
by
go ahead.
um all right, I'll talk to Eric. He's a good friend. He's a nice
But
guy.
he's one of, I recently posted about the
He yeah,
recommendations that I do. And he's one, hey, it's peanuts to him maybe, but I think I've generated about 10 subscriptions for him. So that's not nothing.
yeah. I'm gonna have to go now though.
Oh, I'm
I do
so
have to
sorry.
see to other stuff. No, don't apologize. I have fun chatting with you, but time has taken uh has you know taken over.
Well,
Um,
one last
but
thing is if you can
yeah,
post something about the
I'll
Draconic and I want to promote it on Instagram because I like it. I want to, if you post on it, I will, um, who knows what's going to happen, but I want to be like, this is something that I recommend that I am really enjoying. If you post it, I want to do that because
okay,
on Instagram, I'm a little bit
okay,
stronger, I would say. However, things like X, I'm out of my depth. That's not Blue Sky's my home. It's my liberal safe space. I don't know X. X is untested waters for me. I'm in my echo chambers, you know?
Yeah, I don't have much of a following there.
But that said,
Yeah, one
I've
second.
worked hard to do
I'll
like
just
I
do
know you got
this.
to go, but that's all I want to say is please post that so I can promote that if you would consider it. All right.
And yeah, and currently I'm trying to get back to Instagram, and oof, it's trickier than I thought it was going to be. But I want to get back to doing. I used to do podcast reading Tolkien's letters on Instagram. I want to get back to
Mm,
doing that, just for Instagram and build, because that's how I got followers on Instagram. Wasn't through pictures. It was through reading Tolkien's letters. So and
yeah.
Howard's letters. I should do that. Though Howard, contrary to expectation, has not yet said the N word. He doesn't seem to have used it very often, contrary to what people think. He seems
I'm
to have
not
favored the
familiar with
term
Howard.
blacks,
I just want to say I don't know
um,
this person.
which is pretty. Um, Conan the Barbarian, Robert E. Howard.
Oh, okay. I know Conan the Barbarian.
Oh, Sam, I've got a reading list. I know I got a reading like the order to read Conan stories video coming out on YouTube.
I'm a Conan
I'll
virgin,
share it with
so
you and
I'm
you'll be able to
uncharted
read them.
territory.
Uh,
You can dump whatever Conan you want on me, and I'm into it.
yeah.
Conan,
I have
who's
all
the
this
okay? So
stuff.
like, what's that edition?
The black. This is the complete chronicles of Conan. I'll send you the link
Okay,
after my phone call with the university. So
okay,
yeah, I
and
gotta
I'll
get going. So I'll
yep,
talk to you later, Sam. And
I'll post this okay on my podcast if that's all right.
sure, sure. And next time I'll have to interview you.
Yes, if you're willing to
And we'll
get
discuss Knight's Tale. No, what we'll do is we'll do a podcast on Knight's Tale, and I'll put that on
Mhm.
YouTube
Yes, and you can come
on
with
my history
all of
channel,
your you
and
can
I
come
will.
with all of your roasting. You can roast it all you want because I'll be right there saying, "Hey, I love this fucking movie." So I'll let you go. Good luck on your
Yeah,
call.
sure,
Thank you for
sure.
bearing with me through me putting my foot in my mouth and then when it's not in my mouth, interrupting you. And leaving the
It's okay.
room.
It's
What a
okay. You
low
interrupt away.
class
I
move.
enjoyed.
I was just trying to get literature to show. I was just trying to get literature to show. That's all. That was my Norse stuff. Bye.
Okay. Well,
Love
take
you.
care, Sam.
Go. Take care. Bye.